pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am in a brand new location. What do you think? Isn't it fabulous? The only thing I don't like about it is the little stool that I'm sitting on. The next stool is so far away and this little stool is so small that there's no place to set my rather heavy microphone or my cup of coffee or anything. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of juggling here. Anyway, that's besides the point. I am here today with a book review of this wonderful novel, The Brontës Went to Woolworths by Rachel Ferguson, a 1931 novel. I absolutely loved it. It was a 5-star read. It's a Marmite book, so let me tell you a bit about it. But first, I want to tell you how I found out about it. I found out about this book because it's one of Barbara Pym's favorite novels. Barbara Pym is probably my favorite novelist. It was written in her biography by Hazel Holt. I forget the title of it, but there's quite a bit about this novel in the book and why it was Barbara Pym's favorite, because like the protagonists in this novel, Barbara Pym was famous for her rich imaginary life about the people she encountered or saw walking across the street or sat across the dining hall table with at university, and then spinning this elaborate fantasy about them and stalking them to add to the fantasy and going to the library to look them up in Who's Who, and then often eventually meeting them and developing a real life relationship. But her imagination was so fertile that this was how she was in the world for her whole life, not just when she was 20. So I was drawn to check this novel out because of that, because I appreciate that about Barbara Pym's life story and also not her novels, the way she employs that same kind of stalking, richly imaginative personality into her characters. So this novel did not disappoint. I must say that I was worried about halfway through about what the point of it was going to be, and for this particular reader, at least, it did have a point that's hard to articulate other than just me saying, please read the book. I would say if you aren't completely engaged with it after 30 to 50 pages, it might not be for you. Some people find the language a little bit archaic. It's published in 1931. It's set in 1920s London, and so some of the references and turns of phrase are a little archaic. I love that. I googled the crap out of this book and learned new things. Stay tuned for my upcoming In Other Words. But this is about a family, the Carney family. There's the mother, she's maybe 50 or 60. There are 2 adult daughters, Deirdre, who narrates a lot of it, or is the narrative focus for a lot of the novel. Her sister, Katrine, not Latrine, Katrine, and their much younger sister, who's maybe 10 or 11, Sheila without the A, Sheol. They are avid readers and a very playful, tight-knit family, but we soon realize, and it's very destabilizing for the reader to begin to piece together how much they all live in their imaginations, to the point where they believe that their dog used to be the Pope. And one of their former dolls has a rich life. She's off somewhere. I can't remember if she was a princess, became a princess, or whatever. And they talk about these as if they're real events. And so from the very beginning of the story, you are wondering, are these people crazy? Is this healthy? Is this psychiatrically diagnosable? What the heck? Is this just a silly novel about, fantasy world? What the hell? And I really enjoyed that turbulence, and you get to a certain point where you at least think you are able to distinguish between what is real and what's not. That was a constant insecurity for me as I was reading. I was always questioning it, and I loved that. There's also a bit of a hint of occult, supernatural stuff, and those longtime subscribers will know how deeply allergic I am to anything about ghosts or shit like that. And I loved that part of this novel because it was never clear. Again, was it just something that was imagined or did it really happen? But whatever it was, I just took utter delight in all of that narrative instability. and all of the questions that it arose. Many readers just read this as a lighthearted book, and again, people that know me well know that if that's all it was for me, I wouldn't have liked it that much, because I'm not a lighthearted reader. I like to have something going on underneath. So at about the halfway point, I was thinking, I hope there's some kind of a point to this. One of the main objects of their rich, I was going to say inner, but it's not just inner, interpersonal, imaginary fantasy lives is a judge, Toddington. Deirdre is a journalist and a wannabe novelist, and she has some professional reason why she sees him, and she just latches onto him in her imagination, and then the whole family starts spinning stories about Judge Toddington, who they call Toddy, and his wife, Lady Mildred. And they don't like Lady Mildred, and they have all kinds of reasons why they don't like Lady Mildred, but they love Toddy. Eventually, Deirdre finagles a way to meet Lady Mildred, and then there's a shift in the narrative. It's not a complete shift, but it introduces an element of marrying the fantasy with the reality. And that becomes a strand of the novel that is also really rich, entertaining, and psychologically complex. So you've got all of these strands of what's real, what's not, how to reconcile the two, and this little bit of kind of supernatural ghosty stuff, which ends up having quite a bit to do with the Brontës. I'm not going to say any more about the plot. But the Brontës were like these sisters. Into their adulthood, they would construct rich, elaborate fantasies about people they were acquainted with or about other worlds, and it was as elaborate, apparently, as it is in this novel. And the family name of these sisters, this family, the Carney family, was actually the name of a relative of the Brontës, and there's all kinds of allusions and similarities and a whole bunch of intertextual shenanigans that unfold in the novel. So if you're a Brontë fan, I would also say you might enjoy this book. But like I say, it's not for everybody, and I was just swept away by it. I can't wait to reread it. I can't wait to read more by Rachel Ferguson. There was a whimsical intelligence about it that brought me down to the level of asking questions about reality and fiction. Those especially congealed near the end of the book, where Deirdre is having a conversation with Lady Mildred, by which time Lady Mildred is questioning how carried away Deirdre and her family get with all this story making, this making shit up stuff. And this conversation, which there's no spoilers in here, the narrator here is Deirdre. I said, "Look here, Lady Mildred, I can't explain, but one can sometimes remember things one never saw, just as it's possible to be homesick for places one's never been to." But here I struck a dead spot. I trailed off into, if you're frightfully interested in people, you begin to know things about them. She shook her head and said I was a funny girl. I often think that perhaps there is only a limited amount of memory going about the world, and that when it wants to live again, it steals its nest like a cuckoo. That just linked up all the strands of the story in a way that it didn't matter if some of the characters believed the supernatural stuff, the little bit of supernatural stuff that's pretty central to parts of the story, or was this a psychological problem, coping mechanism for grief? It didn't end up mattering. The imagination is... The narrative imagination, whatever the problem, even if narrative imagination is the problem, narrative imagination is the solution. That's kind of what I took away from this book. I will be thinking about the characters in this novel forever and wondering what to make of it and what's real. And I will probably end up inventing shit about them and just taking it to the next level. I think Rachel Ferguson would want me to be doing that. If any of this resonates for you, I urge you to please check out The Brontës Went to Woolworths. Thanks for watching.